Tom Clark's Main Event is a Boink Studios production. Follow us on Twitter at Boink Studios and check out our Facebook page where you can see all of our projects, past, present, and future. And now, on with the show.
This is Daddy's show. Step off.
Hey, what is up? Welcome to the program, folks. Thank you for tuning in. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Tom Clark, and you are listening to Tom Clark's Main Event. This is episode number 69 of the podcast, and if you are joining us today for the very first time, we will bid you welcome. If you're coming back for a repeat visit, we say, hey, thanks for checking back in with us. And to all those involved, we will extend to you, as always, the customary laurel and a hearty handshake. Thanks for listening. Thanks for reading. Thanks for supporting. And hey, thanks for always being there, Doc. Episode number 69. Now that the obligatory Tombstone and Blazing Saddles references are out of the way, as per the norm, welcome to the show. If you are a first-time listener, hey man, we love you. You know we do. Thanks for being here. We expect to have some first-time listeners this time around. Had a lot of fun doing this episode, not going to lie. The main event is going in different directions these days, and I, for one, am very happy about it. This is Boink Studios Presents Tom Clark's Main Event. So, if you are here for the first time, quick rundown who you're talking to, or who's talking to you, as the case may be. I'm a WB feature columnist for Bleacher Report. I also contribute to sportskid.com and the highly esteemed Camel Clutch blog. I own my own production company with best friend Kyle Smith called Boink Studios. We run 3 different podcasts, one of which, the flagship, you're listening to right now. So, welcome. What's up? Glad you're with us. This is going to be some fun. We hope you came here to have fun, because that's what this is. I had a very enlightening and very informative interview with one Charlie Ebersol. And that, folks, is the main event this time around. This is the Charlie Ebersol interview. That's right, folks. Charlie is the son of former head of NBC Sports, Dick Ebersol, the man who is partly responsible for bringing you the doomed XFL. And it's such a shame to say the word doomed in front of the words XFL. Let's be honest, folks. I don't know how many of us at the time expected the league to actually do anything, to actually succeed. But man, they had a chance. I think it had a real chance. And I don't know if it would still be in operation today, if it was able to get past the first season. Who knows? That's the guessing game that we play as wrestling fans and as sports fans. And we played some of that wrestling game during this interview. Before we get underway with the interview, I got to send some shout outs. First of all, to Charlie himself. I got to say a big thank you for the time. Gave a great interview, and I hope it shows a smart guy. And by the time this thing premieres, I don't know when you're going to listen to this particular show, but this is being released the day that the documentary This Was the XFL hits ESPN. It's a 30 for 30 production, and Charlie Ebersol is the man, of course, that is bringing it to you. So if you haven't seen it yet, it's amazing. I saw it a while back, and it's so good. I can't be honest with you, it's almost more entertaining than the story of the XFL itself, just to sit back and listen to it and to watch it all unfold and to listen to the interviews and watch Vince and Dick at the dinner table discussing it and the what ifs and the what could still be and that kind of thing. So it's awesome stuff. Hope you've seen it. If you haven't, you got to check it out, man, because it's well worth your time. DVR that sucker if you can't watch it live, because it's really, really good. So again, a big thank you to Charlie for his time. I also have to reach out and say a big thank you to the folks that helped put this whole thing together. First of all, Jennifer Christie, who reached out to me from ESPN. Thank you very much for the opportunity, Jennifer. It was great to work with you on this deal. And also to Kelsey Jenkins with Beck Media that helped facilitate putting the actual interview together. I did the call-in. It was a great little bit of music that I got to listen to on hold that immediately took any nerves out of the equation. I wasn't too awful bad there, to be honest with you, but it was cool. I got a kick out of it. We shared a little laugh over that, so that was fun times. So again, a big thank you to everyone involved. We do appreciate it here at the main event. It was a fun time. And we hope you have fun listening to the interview, because we tried to cover as much as possible. I tried to get into all areas of XFL, including everything we could possibly think of, from the ideas behind it Charlie was very forthcoming about his relationship with his dad and, of course, with Vince, who is like a second father to him. So we hope you get a kick out of listening to it because we sure had a lot of fun doing it. And just as we did with the Randy Orton episode, we're going to give you the full interview. And then after it's over, we're going to come back with some parting comments. So one more time, a big thank you to all you guys out there for listening. Hope you enjoy the interview, and we'll be back right after it ends. So please stay tuned. Charlie Ebersol, thank you very much for your time. Welcome to the main event. Let's go ahead and jump right in here if we can. The documentary, This Was the XFL, directed by yourself, which is excellent. It does a great job of pulling the audience in, keeps your attention from start to finish, and had a lot of nice surprises along the way. How much fun was this for you to tackle and to do?
It was, you know what? First of all, I love that question. It was extremely fun, and it was extremely scary. My memory of the XFL was how much fun it was and how zany and sort of out of this world the whole experience was. And so doing it was, I knew was going to be crazy. But then the other side of it was interviewing my father and Vince, two men who, my dad's quite literally my father, and Vince, a father figure to me, was absolutely terrifying.
Well, it seemed like everyone you talked to was very forthcoming and seemed very ready to tell their side of the story. Did you find that going in? Was that the case when you started doing the interviews?
Yeah, it was funny because when I first approached my dad and Vince, and it was a lot of if Vince says yes, I'll say yes. If Dick says yes, I'll say yes. And when they both finally said yes, I said, you have to understand two things. One, I need your promise that you are going to be, totally open with me. But secondarily, that you understand that you're going to have no creative control over this, that this is, my film, and I want to tell this story as accurately and straightforward and fun as possible, while at the same time, not falling prey to the charms of Vince McMahon and my father.
Well, speaking of your father and Vince, in terms of their partnership and their friendship over the years, is it as natural of a thing as it comes across on camera?
Yeah, that dinner sequence, I keep telling people, the dinner sequence at the end of the film was really not scripted. It was, I had them, as scheduling finally got settled and I knew that I was going to have them on the same day, I asked them if I got the interviews done relatively quickly. I mean, combined, I think I interviewed them for 8 hours. If they'd let me buy them dinner, if they'd sit and talk, and they agreed. And what I think ended up coming out of it is probably the most, from my viewpoint, the most interesting part of the film, because it's them really opening up about who they are and what they're all about. And that really was what I wanted to convey, because I think people have a very clear perspective of who they think Vince is, and a lot of people think about who they think my father is. And I wanted to really show a different side of it. I wanted them to see the relationship the way I had experienced it for 30 years, which is this really deep friendship and love.
Well, you ended on a high note, because I got to tell you, before you got to that scene, I was gutted, because the entire documentary, and I know how it played out in terms of being a fan and watching it all unfold when it actually happened. So I know how the story was going to kind of end there. And I'm sitting there like, oh my God, it was such a down note. It's over. It ended. It didn't work. It's a failure. Then you get to the dinner scene. And when your father asks Vince, do you ever think about doing it again? And Vince says all the time, I could have come up out of my seat. I mean, what a great moment. And for my money, the best moment in the entire program. Was that a very tongue-in-cheek moment, or has there been some serious discussion about maybe doing something else with the XFL, starting it all over again?
No, yeah. I mean, when I interviewed Jerry Jones, I interviewed Jerry the morning after WrestleMania, and I'd sat with Jerry during WrestleMania, and he'd never been to a wrestling event before. And he was on his feet cheering when The Rock came out and John Cena and all these other events. And so when I sort of asked him, because in his sit-down interview, I asked him about that, knowing that I was going to be interviewing Vincent and my dad. And Jerry was like, look, we desperately need a developmental league in the NFL. The Jimmy Garoppolos of the world really need an opportunity to get snaps so that Bob Kraft knows whether or not he's, ready and willing and, to be the starting quarterback if anything ever happens to Tom Brady. And so I think that, it takes a strength of personality and will to do what Vince did, and you have to be Vince sort of to do it. And I think Jerry, more than anybody, recognizes the value of showmanship and good business sense. And so, yeah, Vince has thought about it a lot. Now, keep in mind, Vince is in his mid-70s now and is sitting atop a multi-billion-dollar industry business that's only growing. And so I think the energy and investment required to get this off the ground might be a younger man's game, but certainly something that he openly talks about a lot. Although that was the first time my dad and Vince had ever spoken about it.
Would your dad be on board if something like that materialized for the XFL?
My dad is very, very, very retired. When my father retired 5 years ago, we all sort of rolled our eyes. And then when he turned down, offers to be the commissioner of a couple of the, I won't name them, professional sports leagues and other things like that, we started perking up and thinking, wow, he might actually be retired. He advises for people now, but won't accept any money because he doesn't ever want to be on the hook to write a report or have to cancel a vacation to go set up a meeting or whatever. So I think if Vince did this, my dad would certainly, look, they talk a lot anyway. He'd consult and make suggestions about who to bring on and so on and so forth. But I'm not sure there's anything other than me asking him to sit in a documentary and answer some questions that would pull him out of retirement. He takes retirement as seriously as he did being the head of NBC Sports.
So getting back to Vince for a second, do you think that the whole process of doing the documentary has maybe sparked something else in him to maybe get back to the XFL idea and start it again, or has it always been there? Or did this just bring it out, or what's your take on that?
Well, I think the level of interest in the documentary, he called me over vacation and was asking me because he'd heard rumors about, what the traction had been around the marketing for the film. And I definitely felt a renewed sense of, you know what, I wasn't wrong. Like there's a big appetite and audience for this thing. And so I think that helps. I mean, when we released the trailer for the film 6 weeks ago or 8 weeks ago, within 24 hours, it became the most viewed 30 for 30 trailer ever. And to date, it now is like 3 or 4 films combined don't have the number of views that trailer has alone. So I think he recognized how real the interest was. And I think in this modern era where he has his own channel, I mean, his over-the-top network, the WWE network, provides him with a lot more power than he used to have. So I think there's value. I also think 15 years later, the business model of the WWE, as real as it was in 2001, now is fully understood. I mean, their stock valuation and them, they went public like 8 days before Vince announced the league. So they had not really been a publicly traded company or anything like that. And then all of a sudden, now we're 16 years later, and it is impossible to question the wherewithal and veracity of Vince McMahon and his business based on, what we've now seen.
Well, there's no question he conquered the wrestling world. I mean, I grew up a fan and have been a lifelong fan. And I grew up during the territory days when I saw one company after another shut down because they couldn't hang with Vince. I mean, one by one, he took them down. And I have to imagine his confidence was probably at an all-time high when that took place, especially when WCW closed its doors. So I imagine that's got to be the case now as well.
I would, I'd alter the way you said that. I would say you saw wrestling company after promotion after promotion crumble under the weight of what Vince was doing, because WWE didn't just get big. He went and he conquered each of those regions one at a time, and he did so ruthlessly and built it, and it was built on the back of him having a vision. And I think the only thing preventing Vince from creating a new football league today is he just doesn't have a clear vision of what he wants to do. The XFL, for all that's said about them not really having a full understanding of what they're trying to do, Vince clearly saw the need for someone to come in and offer a type of football that was more reminiscent of the old way, and less corporately driven. And I think that those initial numbers that first weekend proved that thesis out. Now, they got incredibly unlucky with the first game being a blowout, as opposed to, a good football game, and then the second night having the power go out. But I think that, if the chips had fallen just slightly different, I think that, you've got a very successful league. So I do think his confidence is not misplaced.
When it comes to the demise of the XFL, it's really a shame because toward the latter half of the season, the games got very highly competitive. I mean, I would have put any of their games up against anything in the NFL at that time, possibly even today. And I just wonder, had he surrounded himself with the right football people at the time, I mean, would the outcome have been differently? Would things have gone much different for the XFL then?
The football operations were people that were very concerned with their careers and what they were going to be able to get out of being in the NFL in the future. And so they weren't willing to take risks. I think knowing what he knows now and understanding who would need to come in, look, the LA team won the championship because Al Luginbill understood football operations enough that he understood how to utilize the best parts of the new playbook, et cetera. So I think if they built a league today, they'd hire someone like an Al Luginbill to build the football side of it, and they would be much better off. But you're right. The football operations of the past were whether or not it was malicious is unclear, but at the very least it can be said that they subverted the success of the league through their inability, inaction, and probably ineptitude.
It did sort of feel like during the process of watching the documentary that a lot of these guys, the football side of it, they were just sort of along for the ride. I don't know if they were fully behind Vince or Dick in terms of what their vision was for the XFL, or if they were just there going through the motions. Did you get that sense when you interviewed the football personalities involved with this?
Well, I think that, look, Basil, the president of the XFL, Basil DeVito, was he was strapped to the front of an intercontinental ballistic missile that was this league. He had less than a year to, from inception to execution, create an entire league. So I think his hair was on fire, and he was going 1,000 miles a minute. I think Shanzer, who is my dad's number two, who is really point on the XFL, I think he was really trying to make sure that what they were promising was going to get executed. I do think that at the level below that, there were not enough people who were bought into the grand vision or who understood the grand vision enough that you got a lot of people who were just doing their job. And really, in a thing like this, in an entrepreneurial situation, you don't want people who just do their job. You want people who are doing 10 times their job and willing it into existence the same way you are. And I think that wasn't happening, particularly in football operations where, they just saw this as, here's another opportunity for me to play football, which is not what the XFL is meant to be. The XFL is meant to be revolutionary. And if you're building something revolutionary, you need revolutionaries to be on the ground making it happen. And there just weren't enough of them, I don't think. Which, by the way, I think is largely Vince's fault and my dad's to a certain degree, because they just tried to do it too fast. If they'd taken 2 years and allowed for 6 months of preseason so the football was pretty good and they really figured out the product, it'd be great. But that wasn't, that's not how Vince works. Vince wants to come out of the gate and get it done because he believes that momentum, drives greatness. And I think, they paid the price for it.
Did introducing the WWE style into the league to the latter half of their only season, was that the death sentence? I mean, did that bring about the ultimate downfall, or was it over already, do you think, by the time that happened?
Oh, I think it was over. I think it was over after the first game because the press had set up the marketing set up an expectation that this was going to be rough and tumble, crazy, unbelievable football. And the game didn't have that. And the press set up that this was a bunch of salacious crap that did not deserve people to watch. So you had a confirmation by when the game was 19-0, and the New York team had like 34 total offensive yards, and nothing that was, and none of the sex appeal had really happened. I think you had a confirmation bias among the vast majority of the audience that this thing was just flash in the pan and not that great. And I don't think you can win an audience back that would validate a prime time spot. So I think that, I think the goose was cooked at that point in time. And then, the insult to injury was when the power went out at 13 minutes in the second game, which is really significant because they don't take the first rating number of the show until 15 minutes. So they lost probably 60, 70, 80% of their audience on that second game because they had 3 minutes of a blackout that carried them over the 15-minute mark. So the first time Nielsen took a rating, they were looking at a rating that reflected probably 70% shooting out, and nobody came back after that. So I think that, if people had sampled it and it had been, which was the B game that opening night, and it was like 34-37 and a guy got injured during the scramble, I think people would have probably given it a better chance. But by the time you got to weeks 3 and 4 and they start doing the WWE stuff, I think the ship has sailed. I think that was an attempt to shore up the WWE audience, just to show that you could keep life support going, but the core audience was gone by then, way gone.
Well, to your point, the pro wrestling fan base is a very loyal fan base. They hang on, they come back week after week. Like I said, always very loyal, always very committed to the product. But then the casual football fans have left the XFL by that time. I find it very ironic, by the way, when it comes to Bob Costas, who seemed still to really harbor a lot of hate for the XFL, that he's sitting there hating on the game and hating on the whole idea of it. But now today, the NFL uses a lot of the technology that XFL introduced during that time. Is Bob just not able to let that go? Is he still hanging on to it, or does he just enjoy being right?
Well, Bob enjoys being right, that's for sure. Bob's an interesting guy, right? Because he and Vince and my father are all very close. Bob worked for Vince before he worked for my dad, and had a relationship with Vince. My honest to God interpretation of Bob Costas is that Bob Costas, and he said so much in his interview, Bob Costas was a very, very big fan of wrestling growing up. And even in the 80s when my dad was doing Saturday Night Main Event with Vince, Bob was at WrestleMania. He was covering those kind of things because he loved the idea of good versus evil and the ultimate bad guys and ultimate clean good guys, whatever. What you have to remember, and I think you're a wrestling fan, so you probably will, but in that era of 2000, 2001, to compete with the WCW, Vince had created what became known as the Attitude Era of wrestling. And in the Attitude Era, you had guys like Triple H, whose tagline was "Suck It," and they had D-Generation X, and they had the degradation of women and all these other things. And Bob, I think, felt very. I think he was very upset that the sort of the nostalgia he had for wrestling was gone because of what they'd created in this sort of darker period in the late 90s, early 2000s. And he felt a sense of decorum was being lost, and it upset him. And I think that that's what came out about the XFL. I also think that Bob believes, and his passion and love for sports is largely born out of a purist mentality. I mean, he loves baseball and can't understand why steroids are a part of the game and doesn't like it and holds people to a very high standard with respect to it. That's a function of his purity and his belief in purity. So I think that he really did not want something like the XFL to succeed, despite the fact that he really does love my father and really does love Vince. I mean, my dad is largely responsible for most of Bob's major success. I think he's it's hard for him to reconcile those two things against his purest vision of what he thought sports should be.
So what's next for you after this documentary, now that it's it's going to be out there for the world to see and consume. What's next for you? Do you want to stick to more sports related kind of projects, or what's next on the horizon for you?
Well, we have a number of TV shows. You know, I created and produced a show called The Profit on CNBC, and another show called the West Texas Investors Club. So we're back in production on those shows. They'll be coming out soon. My little brother Willie, who has directed a number of the films that I've done, is currently finishing up his own 30 for 30, which will be coming out later this year. So we're focused on that. And then we've got a handful of new shows that are going into production. I'm sort of toying around with what I hadn't directed in a long time. I'd like to. I definitely think this brought that bug back to me, and I've got to figure out what my next project would be to direct. But for right now, I'm concentrating on a lot of the shows that we have in production.
Well, we certainly wish you good luck on everything to come. And like I said before, the doc is excellent. It's very well done, very entertaining, very fun to watch, of course. If you had to sum up the XFL's legacy after having grown up around it, and then after, going back and doing the documentary now, what is your opinion on the lasting legacy of the XFL, if there is one?
Oh, there absolutely is one. I'll answer that question in two different ways. I would say the legacy of the XFL is very apparent in every professional sports broadcast that you watch on television today. The Skycam, the Steadicam, the interviews on the side of the field, all that stuff is what the XFL brought to the television world. The second thing I'd say is, for me, the legacy of the XFL is that celebration of two things. One, a beautiful relationship in an unlikely place between two unlikely friends. And the second thing is what I believe entrepreneurship is all about, which is failure. You fail 99 times as an entrepreneur, and if you're good enough and you keep trying, the one time you succeed because of what you learn from failure. And I hope that this film conveys sort of that underlying message, which I think ultimately is the most important thing that I could bring to this generation of sports viewers, because I do think in sports today there are very few risks being taken, especially in broadcast. And I hope that this story on some level shows you what it's like to go out, get your ass kicked, get back up, dust yourself off, and get ready to do the next.
Very well said. Charlie Ebersol, thank you so much for being on the program again. We appreciate it.
I really appreciate it. You have a wonderful day, and I look forward to hearing what you read.
My thanks once again to Charlie Ebersol for the interview. Hope you enjoyed that one. I had a lot of fun doing it. I think it all came out quite nicely. Please pardon some of the audio. I could have told you that up front, but we're working on fixing that, okay? Because I need a little bit better equipment if I'm going to continue to do these interviews over the phone, which I do want to do. We've got a couple lined up that I'm not going to talk about right now, but you'll be finding about them, all about them actually, in all good time. So the XFL. Let me tell you guys, man, if you weren't around during the birth and the utter demise in just a year's time of the XFL, you missed out, because it was a thing to behold. It was fun, it was exciting, and it was tragic all at the same time. And if you're a sports guy or a wrestling guy and you have not seen the documentary, please check it out. If you're a sports girl or a wrestling girl and you're not seeing the documentary, please check it out, because you will not be disappointed. Like I said before, man, it's very well done, very entertaining. And when it comes to my memories of the XFL, I just remember thinking, this is the weirdest thing I've ever seen. Even being a lifelong pro wrestling fan, I tuned in for the games and watched, and me and my friends, hung out and watched the first two games back to back, and it was quite the ride. I can't imagine being involved in it as it all went down, and sort of watching your dreams sort of come to life and then sort of just fade away. So again, it was perhaps a comedy, perhaps a tragedy, all at the same time. Very Shakespearean in that regard, if I may say. But yeah, man, if you haven't checked it out yet, please do so. It's very cool, and I think you'll enjoy it. So that's going to do it for us. We're going to remind you one more time again where you can find Boink Studios and yours truly. Again, check me out on Bleacher Report. I'm there pretty much every day of the week and twice on Sunday. You can also find me at Sportskeeda, Camel Clutch blog, and my own websites, which I run, tomclarkbr.wix.com/blog and tomclarkbr.wix.com/boink, which is the Boink Studios website. Please go check them out because I think you'll enjoy them. And again, we're on the Facebook, we're on the Twitter, and we're everywhere you can possibly find social media, you'll find Boink Studios. So please go check us out. Check out our other 2 podcasts, our sister podcast, Tom Clark's 30-Minute Fun Show, which yours truly does with his 8-year-old son, and it's a blast, as you can well imagine. And also Tom and Kyle's Comedy Action Hour. So that's it, man. Thanks again. Please go check us out. Remember, all of our content, podcasts, columns, everything's free of charge to you. So go support the brand. We do appreciate your business and your patronage as always. And we will see you next time on Tom Clark's Main Event.